What if your next team workshop delivered the results you hope for? And what if everyone believed that the working session was a valuable use of their time and felt inspired to take action? My name is Miriam Hartness, and it is my mission to help you to deliver workshops that work. Today with me on the show is Dirk Verburg. He had a career in HR and started his own business as management consultant. Today, he helps the leadership teams to go from strategy to action. So we're going to discuss today how to keep things running and keep momentum after the workshop. Stay tuned. Hello, Dirk.
Hello, Miriam.
Good to have you here.
Thank you. Love to be on your show.
Yes, and we're here meeting at Wemanity today, who were kind enough to host us. So we are sitting in an agile working space. So you came all the way from Switzerland.
Yeah.
To spend your Easter holidays with your family.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm a management consultant and executive coach, and I'm based in Switzerland, but I also do a lot of work in the Netherlands. So I'm regularly here. Also, half my family lives in Switzerland right now, and my two oldest children are studying in the Netherlands. So in that sense, I'm hopping quite regularly between those two countries.
Beautiful. And I'm super excited to talk to you today about how to actually implement strategies. Because over the last episodes, we spoke a lot about connection, about how to get started, how to create safe space in the room. And I hear very often from people that they struggle with keeping momentum after decisions have been made in the workshop or after all these strategies have been developed. So I would love to talk to you what comes after vision and mission and how can we keep that. So how did you actually come up with this general topic? What's your story?
Now, my story is as follows. I worked as a project manager, a management consultant, and also as an HR leader. And throughout my career, I noticed more and more occasions where, businesses defined a strategy or they defined a business plan or they defined a project or project goals. And more often than not, businesses don't deliver. So either a business plan doesn't get executed, a strategy doesn't get executed, or let's say a project is kind of terminated halfway. And given the fact that my Belbin profile is a typical finisher completer, that always, let's say, didn't give me a very satisfactory feeling. And that made me think, well, what kind of intervention techniques can I develop in order to make sure that strategies and business plans and projects are actually, executed and, brought to fruition and also deliver the required results.
And this implies that the lack of delivery is not due to budget or to strategies, but for me, I hear that there are people problems in the way.
I would have to think very, very hard to remember one occasion where there were basically practical problems. More often than not, it's a lack of alignment between the people who are responsible for, delivering the strategy or executing the business plan.
How do you actually go through from... You have this leadership, and usually I guess that they have very clear ideas already on how the strategy looks like.
Now, there's usually a leader, and the leader at a certain moment is either impatient or frustrated that he or she is unable to implement his or her strategy. That's usually the starting point.
Otherwise, they wouldn't call you, right?
Correct. So there needs to be a certain degree of... let's say people need to feel a certain need. And now that's where it usually starts with. And then it's a matter of, asking questions. So when I sit together with leaders, then the first thing I'm asked them, well, can you explain your strategy or your business plan? Can you explain it to me? And that's usually the first hurdle, because if I can't understand it, then there's usually an issue. Then I can safely assume that there might be other people who cannot understand it either. So the first thing is clarifying the strategy or the strategic objectives or the goals or the business plan. Because what I quite often hear from senior leaders is they don't get it. And then
who's they?
Yeah, that's also my question is then always, who is they, and what is it that they don't get? And the they is then often their own leadership team or the people reporting to their own leadership team, and the they is then usually the strategy. And then, so the first thing is the strategy clear enough? Is it specific enough? What needs to be done? Because if organizations come with the idea of we want to be more customer oriented, or we need to be more X or need to be Y, that's not very specific. So you need to say, okay, what is your strategy? What do you hope to achieve? And what benefits will it bring? So I push to, let's say, to make this as clear and explicit as possible.
And you would do this through a guided discussion with everyone of the leadership team around a table?
Yeah, what I usually ask is for the business leaders to explain it to me as clearly as they can. And then I facilitate a session between the leader and his or her leadership team. And sometimes I have meetings with individual participants, but bring everyone together. And my first step is always, asking the leader to present the business strategy or the business plan, and give everyone an opportunity for clarifying questions. So it needs to be clear, what is the goal that we are trying to achieve. Yeah, and that's the first step. Yeah.
How often does it happen to you that the leadership realizes that they hear the same words, but they understand something different?
Now, it is usually, let's say, it's either a situation that it's, and that's also what I witnessed, that people are simply not aware that there's a strategy, or so simply not aware of the goal. So that's the first stage. And the second stage is, that they don't understand what it means. And that's quite helpful, because that's just a matter of explaining, what's the topic, what's the issue that we're trying to convey. But more often than not, there's a disagreement. And that's, of course, a much more, interesting situation.
Yes, especially for a facilitator. How do you deal with the tension in the room? Now,
for me, there's always two things. It's important. It's important that they become clear. And it's important that the team can continue after my intervention. So what that means is that I always channel, let's say, that energy and try to deal with it in a, quite a neutral way, in the sense of, I think, some people in the room, don't agree with that, and others don't agree with this. So make clear what the differences are. And then, organize discussions around that theme. And then, because it's a matter of, you can hardly ask people to execute something that they vehemently disagree with. So if I would jump straight away from, okay, now everyone understands it, now we're going to do it, without securing the buy-in, then you skip an essential step in the process.
So how do you secure the buy-in?
Now, how I secure the buy-in is ensuring, let's say, if one or two people, severely disagree with the leader, then, first have a plenary discussion, and perhaps, organize an offline discussion with the people disagreeing with the strategy plus the leader, in order to, talk it through in more detail. Yeah, because the minimum position you need to get people in is from, let's say, against a certain strategy or a certain strategic objective, to get them into a neutral mode where they at least cooperate with what the idea is. So yeah, that's relatively easy, because at a certain moment it's also quite important for senior leaders to explain, let's say, why it's important. And if push comes to shove, they also need to say, look, this is just incredibly important. I'm ultimately responsible for this unit or for this organization. This is a strategy. So in case you disagree with the strategy, we may have a problem. And that's, of course, a discussion people feel very, very uncomfortable to have.
Oh, yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's quite often you need to force a certain level of clarity before you can, implement complex strategies or business plans.
Absolutely. And it's funny that you're mentioning it, because yesterday I recorded an episode for next week with Meg, and we talked about conflict and how to make conflict your ally. Yeah. So the benefits actually of having this tension, because it clarifies. So today we're not going down this path. Yeah, because but
I'd be very interested to hear it.
Yes. You tell me what you think about it and whether you have different strategies.
Yeah.
So once you got over this discomfort and you could align the group, what would come next to then really assure not only the buy-in but also the follow-up?
Well, the first thing I do with the group is to have them formulate a joint mission statement.
Mm-hmm.
And that usually helps. So I ask people, I usually break up the group to have them in pairs of 2 or groups of 3 to discuss, okay, what is, let's say, the mission of this organization or of this team or of this project or whatever it is. What purpose does it serve? You know, and that's usually a broader purpose. It's either for society or for business or for a group of customers, but it's usually something lofty. Mm-hmm. And that is the first step. And then I compare, let's say, those different mission statements and then see, what are the common elements, what are the differences, and usually come up with, let's say, something with a group where everyone can, get behind. So that's the most important thing, that people see the context.
Before we continue the show, let me take a brief moment to thank our sponsor, Session Lab. Are you using Excel or Word to prepare and schedule your workshops? Try something that is designed for facilitators. With an easy-to-use drag-and-drop agenda builder, Session Lab allows you to be free and creative in your workshop process design. Session Lab also comes with an immense built-in library of workshop activities and facilitation techniques to help you to find new inspiration for your sessions. Stop messing with spreadsheets and focus on designing engaging workshops. Try it as sessionlab.com. I wouldn't recommend it if I didn't believe in its value myself. Yeah, so then everyone is on the same page, and you have the mission statement. You compare the mission statements, and you come to at least one working mission.
Correct.
And then what is the next step towards execution?
Well, the next step is we're going to translate our lofty mission in a very concrete vision. Mm-hmm. And that vision needs then to be very concrete in terms of, what is the strategic objectives of, what is the strategic objective, or what are the strategic objectives that we are trying to achieve, and then make that very, very concrete. Mm-hmm. So, in a sense, if it's a commercial organization, then it could be this year we will increase our turnover by 15%, or we want to increase our profitability by 20%, or we want to launch at least new 3 product lines, or we want to acquire whatever it is, but it needs to be very concrete, and I love numbers in there.
So would you use the concept of SMART goals?
I'll definitely check if the vision statement is SMART. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Yeah.
And how do you collect these very specific translations of the strategy? Are you doing a brainstorm, or is it just a guided discussion? How do you make sure that everyone is contributing to the discussion and not only the CEO?
Now, because I also usually let people break out again in small groups of 2 or 3 to work and to brainstorm on that, and then bring it back to the room. Because what is for me incredibly important during workshops is that everyone has an opportunity to voice his or her opinion, because there are kind of, let's say, two objectives that need to be met during workshops in this format. One of them is, as again, I'm a very, let's say, output-oriented person, so there needs to be a concrete plan with dates, deadlines, responsibilities, numbers, what have you. But that plan also needs to be, carried by the group. So for me, securing buy-in and a platform for change is incredibly important. And in order to do that, I'm always looking for means to have everyone actively participate. Because especially if you have bigger teams, then you have an opportunity, or then you have a chance that it's only a very small part of the participants, maybe half of them actively participate. If you're lucky. And the other ones, they either don't feel comfortable, or they don't think their opinion counts. So my strategy to deal with that is to have people during the workshop do a lot of work in pairs, and give them an opportunity to voice, let's say, their ideas, their considerations, their hopes, their aspirations, what have you. So it's getting as much active voices in the room as possible.
And with these, I have 2 questions regarding the pairs. How do you form the pairs?
Yeah.
And do they remain the same pairs over the workshop?
Well, let's say for me the most important objective is to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. So I will try to compose the groups to make sure that it happens. And therefore I quite often mix and match the groups so that you don't get a built-in pattern that 2 or 3 people speak on behalf of, their pair of their group.
Yeah. Interesting. And how would you then make sure that the introverts also speak up in the group, or would it be enough that they voice their opinion in these breakout sessions in the pairs?
Now, that's a very good question. For me, I often encourage them to present. So I will try to say to the different subgroups, what I will encourage them to do is say, look, we haven't seen you, or would you mind presenting the opinion of your team? And what I will also do in plenary discussions, I will explicitly ask people to contribute as well. So, for instance, I would say, Mary, I see, you look a little bit puzzled on the statement that so-and-so made. Would you care to elaborate? So I deliberately try to involve people in a conversation and in discussion.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, so then everyone went into a breakout and they discussed the action items of the strategy.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the bunch of action items?
Yeah, now what I then do, there is, let's say, a vision statement, which is quite concrete. It's got percentages and numbers and concrete goals and timelines and what have you. And then I usually, let's say, and it depends a little bit on where the organization is, but then it's a matter of identifying, what are the strategic initiatives necessary to get there. So if you take, for instance, the idea of a company that I once helped that needed to deliver new services, right? Then it's a matter of, one of the pillars we have is, some people need to go away and they need to gather ideas in the organization, what new services could be launched. And then it's a matter of, identifying who's going to do that. Do they need any tools? Do they need any support? Do they need any communication? And when will they bring the results back into the team? So that's if you have a kind of greenfield situation where, let's say, the vision statement is brand new and there are no existing initiatives. I often come also in a situation where you have, let's say, some attempts have been done. So there are a couple of building blocks in terms of strategic initiatives, and then it's a matter of revisiting them and say, look, in the past, some initiatives have been formulated, and then revisit them in the sense of, do we still think that these are the initiatives that we need to undertake, or do we need to review them, create different ones, terminate ones that we don't believe in anymore, etc., etc. So it's revisiting the building blocks. But again, it's about identifying concrete actions, owners, and timelines.
Yeah, this feeling of overwhelm just overcame me.
Yeah.
Because when I thought, of either a green field or a field with different building blocks already, this screams like change management. Oh my goodness, we have to include and involve the entire organization. Maybe this would lead us in a different direction today. So we'll talk about change management another time.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's assume that there's a very specific set of action items that have been defined. And again, when the in the workshop, in the leadership team, ignoring the change management process in the background, how do you get them to prioritize and to structure and to say, okay, this action is important, more important than another one?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, there are different, let's say, techniques about that. There's a multi-voting type of techniques where everyone gets a set of points that he or she can divide across different. That's possible. And it's also making clear what are the criteria, what gets us there. So what I usually do is try to make it as focused as possible. So in a sense of, okay, if we do this, do we honestly think it's going to help? What will it deliver? When is it expected to deliver something? How can we make this successful? So you try to make it as concrete as possible, that you also, through that discussion, certain ideas, may make it to the final list, and other, let's say, ideas are dismissed. So you try, because at the end of the day, you want to wind up with an action plan where the team that you facilitate the session for believes in. They need to believe that, if we start to do this, we'll basically be able to execute a strategy, implement a business plan or whatever,
And also save the team from overcommitting. So if I hear you correctly, you said it's also telling them, okay, if you want to do this, it might imply that you cannot do something else.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So also discussing the opportunity costs of one action over another.
Yeah.
Okay. And then someone has to divide the tasks.
Yeah.
Or not yet.
That's very important. Yeah, that's for me very important. Once you identify the different strategic initiatives, they need to have owners. So people in the room need to say that they're responsible for, taking this initiative further. And they, need to commit to a date when they have the first deliverable. And the first deliverable might be, a concrete plan. How we're going to do that in terms of, resources, timelines, people we want to include or whatever. But there needs to be a concrete deliverable and also specific in time. Let's say I don't believe in making people responsible that are outside of the room, because that's the easiest way. I want I don't believe in orphan projects. I only believe, let's say, in projects which have, let's say, the fingerprints of one or two leadership team members on the gun. That's for me important.
So this means that the person who had the idea would also be in charge of the implementation?
No, not necessarily, because that is not usually not the best way to encourage people to come up with ideas.
Exactly.
No. That's for me. It's
mind.
perfectly fine if people have an idea, and it could also be an idea completely outside this area. I mean, the IT person could come up with an idea which would be, fantastic idea, but would more fit, let's say, with the responsibility of one of his colleagues responsible, for instance, for marketing or sales. So I'm perfectly fine if there's a different, let's say, owner than the one developing the idea. But at the end of the day, each strategic initiative needs to be owned. And
Is there one owner and one implementer, or would you also work in teams?
Now, I think teams are perfect. I mean, if two or three people say that they're responsible for a certain initiative, that is fine as well. I can live with that.
Okay, you can live with it.
Yeah, I mean,
sounds as if it's not the rule, but rather the exception.
Let's say the difficulty is actually, I think what we've discussed and described so far is at best, let's say, half of the story.
Tell me the other half. Wow, finally we're cutting the mustard.
It is, let's say, that's half the story, because what you usually wind up with is if you wind up with a series of PowerPoints or a series of flip charts, and that contains a list of strategic initiatives. They should contain dates, owners, ideally also KPIs and metrics associated with them. And then people leave the room. And more often than not, nothing happens.
Yes.
Yeah, that's quite often the phenomenon.
That's why we're sitting here and I'm asking all these questions.
Correct. So quite often nothing happens, right? Everyone leaves the room and it's business as usual.
Yeah.
So what I usually do is offering my services to explain to business leaders and often to facilitate them how they can take things further. And how they can take things further is they should make it a standing item on their management team meetings and not item 9, but preferably item 2 or 3. Yeah. And that needs to be spent in the sense of, we had this wonderful workshop about 2 weeks ago or a month ago or whatever ago. we all took it upon us to start working on strategic initiatives. These were all accompanied by dates, so we're now going to review where we are. And then it's either a situation which is brilliant, that everyone took up the responsibility, started to work on it, and is on schedule. And also quite often some elements of the plan have not been addressed or only partially addressed. And that is the most crucial thing, what happens, because, how is the leader and how is the team going to deal with that? And if the team or the leader, somehow create the impression that it's okay to have missed these deadlines and that it's okay, given other priorities and initiatives, to not having paid attention, then there's usually, let's say, a downhill direction in terms of the effectiveness, because the signal then to the rest of the organization and the rest of the leadership team is from now, okay, it was apparently okay to miss, let's say, a deadline. What we thought was a crucial piece of work is apparently less crucial than we thought it was. So the next meeting, you usually see even more people who have not paid attention to their the initiatives that they were responsible for, the parts of the projects that they were responsible for.
So
and the meeting after that, it's even less and less and less. Yeah.
So one picture pops up in my mind. I was in Africa on a research project on self-enforcing contracts and how to avoid that poor business people are cheated in a context where there are no written contracts. And I heard the anecdote of one person who didn't pay his bills. So at one evening, the entire village was covered by pictures of this person on every tree with the picture, "Don't sell him anything because he doesn't pay his bills." And I wonder whether you have similar strategies.
Now, let's say what's for me always important is I like a healthy debate. I like a healthy discussion. But naming and shaming the effectiveness of that is, I think, that usually doesn't have a positive long-term effect.
I agree.
So what I usually do if I facilitate teams is just making sure to people and say, look, you need to present in a week's time where you are. Can you tell me about the status? Is there any help that I could give you? Whatever way, do you need to have any input from my side, a clarification, whatever. So usually, let's say it is clear before that management team meeting or leadership team happens, what is there and what isn't there. And then I also had a discussion with the leader of the team, what he or she wants to do and how he or she wants to deal with the fact that, certain people, have not lived up to their commitments.
Yes, in theory it sounds so easy.
Yeah.
And then I just imagine the situation where these managers just say, I have so much to do. Yeah. I'm already working 50 or 60 hours per day. I simply don't have time. So if the CEO wants me to do this strategic thing, what can I drop?
Yeah.
How would you coach maybe also the leader in such a situation to...
Now, what I usually do is during the workshop is try to get those discussions already going. So in a sense of if they pop up, for instance, this initiative, you take this responsibility, do you think you can execute it? Do you have the time, do you have the availability, do you have the resources, etc., etc. So try to have the discussion on beforehand. And then it's a matter ultimately, let's say, of the leader of the group, how to handle that. Quite often, I don't like, let's say, confrontational sessions in leadership teams, etc. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of good coming out of it, to be quite honest.
Not at all. And you poison the atmosphere.
Yeah, and it's difficult and it's unpredictable, and you don't know, let's say, what the long-term damage for the relationship is. But I quite often say to the CEO or the leader of the management team, in a sense of, you have to think about it, because if basically people do not live up to these commitments, you have two problems. First of all, it's going to be very difficult or impossible to implement a strategy or the business plan that you want to, implement or develop. So that, quite frankly, that means that you miss your goals or part of your goals. So that's one problem you have. And secondly, if you let the behavior fester, it's very difficult if you tolerate the behavior of some members in your team, to not tolerate it of other members in your team. So you really need to think about it. And what I usually encourage them to do is to have a very serious discussion with that person offline. Yeah. And then take also that person through the discussion and say, look, if you were in my position, we agreed something as a team. Part of the deliverables needs to be realized by you. You have not delivered, or you're not on track, or you're not on schedule, or whatever. That means, first of all, that a lot of colleagues are, going to look at you in a sense of, what's your contribution to the team, to the plan, etc., etc. Secondly, we miss our goals. So what should we do in order to make this happen? And you can have different scenarios. You can have a scenario like, if you don't feel that you're in a position to deliver, should we ask one of your colleagues to deliver? Or if I gave you a bit more time, do you think you can live up? Or do you need additional resources or whatever? But that's a crucial decision, and that is, let's say, the essence of leadership. Yeah. It can sometimes be a very lonely and difficult role, because if everyone, let's say, is fully aligned and full of energy, and everyone is doing exactly what he or she is, expected to do, then it's of course, easier to be the leader than if you have to deal with those type of situations. But I always say to them, look, this is what I call. Or that's what's called in TQM terms a critical incident, right? Now,
what is TQM?
Total quality management,
okay.
Right? So this is a critical incident. So now something happens that shouldn't happen. There are either two ways. Either you tolerate it, but it has consequences, or you don't tolerate it, and that also has consequences. But whatever it is, you need to make a decision.
Yes, and follow through. And I imagine that each decision you're taking shapes the culture in the future. Yeah. So also, you talked about the costs of accepting this behavior. Yeah. I see a third cost, which is a reputational. Yeah. So if the leadership team or even the middle management learns that the leadership will come up with visions and strategies that are then never implemented, why would they participate or even believe it the next time?
No, and that's correct, and I think it's very, very, very sad, but it happens an awful lot. I mean, I once wrote an article called "Less is More." I'll send you the link. Yeah. And that was just written out of, let's say, the same observation as you made. That quite often leadership teams come up with, lofty plans, ideas, strategy, mission, vision statements, etc. And more often than not, they're not implemented. There's no follow up, no follow through. And the difficulty, of course, you create a lot of cynicism in the organization. Yeah. And the problem is that if you want to do something that really needs to happen, it's very difficult to get the momentum going, because people have an idea, this looks like, initiative A, B, C that was launched, let's say, the past couple of years, and nothing happened. So I think you're making a very, very strong connection between the decisions that leadership teams are taking in this context and the credibility they have with the rest of the organization.
And I wonder, what can you as a facilitator do to really prevent the leadership team from overcommitting, or even the CEO of dreaming too big, and then also to follow through, to make it fun to follow up? Yeah. Because I guess that at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we prefer doing work that is fun, rewarded, that makes us feel good. So how can you impact that as a facilitator? Now,
the way that I do that, and that is usually my added value, is because what I bring is two different elements. On the one hand, I'm a sociologist, and I'm in that sense I'm very skilled at group processes, and interventions in that area. And on the other hand, I also have an MBA. And I also can read balance sheet, profit and loss statements. So I'm also quite good with numbers. So my added value is that I also deliver value from a content point of view. And quite often from a content point of view, I mean, I can never take the place of, the business leader or people in the management team. But just looking at things through, let's say, a business lens usually helps. Like the good questions, like the one that you're pointing. Yeah, but also the ones that you're pointing at, like, what are the other initiatives that are going on? I see the name of John is popping up with all the 7 initiatives that we have defined. But I assume John also has a day job. So it's part of, let's say, those exercises. And it's also, a discussion that I have with the leader if he or she has a plan to see, how realistic is that. So, for instance, if he says about, let's take the assumptions we need to grow our business with 20%, then I usually ask the questions, well, what is the growth on the market, right? Now, and if the market growth is 20%, then it's perfect. But if the average growth on the market is 5%, it basically means...
How are you going to do that?
That basically means that you're, you're going to, to take market share away from your competitors, and that is fine. But it will usually lead to certain reactions from your competitors as well. So it's a matter of, talking them through, because I need to believe in it. I need to understand it in order to help the team further. So, for instance, I also make choices. I mean, if there would be a completely unrealistic plan or completely unrealistic initiatives, then I would find it, let's say, almost unethical to try to facilitate the decision or discussion to get a group to commit to something, which would be very, very hard to or almost impossible to implement.
And if I understand you correctly, you would also consult the leadership team or prevent them from taking maybe to follow false assumptions or overconfident moves. So how would you distinguish, or how would you walk the line between being a facilitator and being a consultant?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that is indeed a very fine line. What I do is trying to have most of those discussions that I have from a content perspective with what the organization are going to do on beforehand. That is for me very important. And because the last thing I want to do is to start second guessing things in workshops, because then it's very confusing. Then you have a leader, you have different participants, and you have also a facilitator who suddenly starts to ask all kind of very complicated content questions. So I try to deliberately withhold that as much as possible. And it's only in situations where I think, well, let me take an example. For instance, if there would be a highly unrealistic idea, and the group would form a consensus around it, and I would say, look, from my perspective, are you guys all convinced that this would be the right methodology or whatever? Or do you all think this is a realistic scenario? But do it more by questioning rather than say, with my other hat on as, knowing the content of what you might be working on a little bit. I doubt it's not going to work, because then it's very confusing.
It is very confusing for the group. And I can also imagine that it would put the CEO and yourself in a very complicated and conflicting situation where the CEO might lose face or fear of losing face, and then you have ego coming in and all these bad friends that we don't want in our workshop rooms.
No, correct. So I would do it mostly, let's say, from a content perspective. I would have serious concern. I would formulate it in the form of questions. But that would be it, because you cannot jump from one role to another. That's very. You have to, at a certain moment, either you're there as an expert delivering content knowledge, or you're there as a facilitator. And if you switch these roles, then it's at a certain moment very difficult, because is Dirk now talking to us from a content perspective, or is he now facilitating a process? That's going to be very confusing.
I always like to ask my podcast guests for a do-it-yourself exercise. So maybe an exercise or something they do in a workshop intervention that usually works no matter what.
One of the things, but I assume that all your guests are already applying that, otherwise it would be very difficult, or your audience is already doing that. But look for ways to deliberately make sure that everyone's voice is heard. And you can do that by explicitly asking people to contribute, not in a kind of confronting way, in a sense of, we haven't heard you and now state your opinion, but more, encouraging people to speak up, and also looking for opportunities for people to speak up. That's important. The other thing, but you already brought that forward to the table, is a wonderful thing, of course, forcing people to come up with smart goals in the sense of, is this really specific? Is it measurable? Is this time bound? So whenever you're facilitating a workshop, I think that will be a very good acid test, how real people are in terms of, the targets that they set, the objectives that they set, and the aspirations that they have.
How would you continue the sentence, workshops fail if?
There is no clearly defined output and where that output should lead through.
And workshops work if?
If there are clear objectives, if they're well facilitated, and if there is a desire, certainly on the part of the leader, to ensure that the workshop delivers the result that he or she wants to get out of it.
Nice. So, what is for you a sound facilitator? Final question.
Now, it's a good question. Now, for me, a facilitator is a couple of things, but you're, let's say, more an expert in that area than I am. But for me, a good facilitator is someone who ensures that all voices are heard, all opinions are being stated, and also someone who provides, let's say, a safe environment for people to state their opinions. So for me, the key is you have to draw out, let's say, everything that's necessary to draw out, also in terms of, what you could call, resistance or disagreement or lack of harmony or whatever, that needs to somehow come clear, but come clear in a non-threatening way, in such a way that the team can continue to work. So ideally, the teams come out of a workshop stronger than they have entered the workshop. That's always, let's say, a high point in my career if I can achieve that.
Yes, like that. Definitely. Great. We're running out of time, so I would love to wrap up. In case someone in the audience fell asleep after the first minute and just woke up and like... What shall I remember? How would you summarize?
Now, I think they should always remember that there are two important dimensions of a workshop. One of the dimensions is content, and it's a responsibility of a good facilitator that content is paid proper attention to, and that the result or the desired output that was the reason to organize the workshop in the first place gets delivered. The second thing a good facilitator needs to do is monitor the process. A couple of important parameters that make sure that all voices are heard. So everyone has a chance to contribute and to participate, and does participate. That all opinions in the room are expressed and dealt with. And as I said, ideally that the team leaves the workshop as a better team than they entered the workshop.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your time in the Netherlands and have a safe trip.
Thank you very much.
To Switzerland.
Thank you very much.
Doei. Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts. And visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.